Giddy up. Hello, folks. Today I'm going to kick us off by talking about how those of us that care about performance on the web can also help to shape a cleaner, greener, low carbon internet. Just a quick intro. Who the hell am I? My name is Fershad Irani. My home on the internet is fershad.com. My home in real life is Taipei, Taiwan. I am an Aussie, if the accent doesn't give it away, but I've lived here in Taiwan for the last 9 years, and all geopolitical tensions aside, it's a pretty sweet place to be. During the day, I consult and help companies make their websites faster, but also look for opportunities to help them reduce the carbon impact of their sites, but also their apps or any digital stuff that they've got going on. At night and on the weekends, you'll probably catch me watching some rugby. I enjoy rugby league and rugby union, as well as playing touch football, which is a variant of rugby. It's just a lot quicker and a bit less rough. So let's get into it. The web has got an emissions problem. That is a bit of a provocative statement. What kind of emissions are we talking about here? What's the scale? Where do they come from? So many questions. It's estimated that around 7% of global electricity use is from ICT. Now, ICT stands for Information Communications Technologies. That's everything that helps us stay connected. Servers, modems, routers, all the way through to smart devices, your smartphones, laptops, etc. 7% of electricity use, that's more than most countries. And if we look at this in terms of CO2 emissions, we're talking around 4% of global CO2 emissions are attributable to ICT. Now, for a bit of context, that's more than Germany, which is the 7th largest emitting country in the world. If we want to compare across industries, 4% is more than civil aviation, which is responsible for around 2% of global CO2 emissions annually. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, though. Unlike civil aviation, which will require feats of engineering and science to decarbonize their industry, I hope that this talk and the ones that follow will give you the sense that we already have the tools available to us to help start to green the web. Before we go on, though, let's just double click on that 4% and get a breakdown of where those figures come from. About 29% comes from data centers and networks. The bulk of it, 52%, comes from consumer devices, and the remaining 19% comes from production. What that means is that we as developers have the ability to influence 3 of those 4 sectors. That's over 75% of the emissions mix. So we've got quite a big playground in which we can play. So let's start playing. What can we do? I hope that over the next few slides, you start to get the sense that a lot of what we already do in web performance to make pages lighter, faster, more responsive, carry through to web sustainability. So we're not talking about doing anything new or anything different. We're just talking about doing a lot more of the good things that we do now. Before we get started, we can measure our site's carbon impact. Tools like Website Carbon and Beacon allow you to enter a URL and they'll give you a carbon estimate of that page. If you want to track over time the carbon emissions of your site, EchoPing is a great service that allows you to do that. And Sitespeed.io also has a sustainability plugin that you can use. It would be great to see sustainability metrics appearing alongside perf metrics in more of our tooling and platforms. I know that WebPage Test has an issue open for this at the moment, and I think I've seen issues in the past for Google Lighthouse and PageSpeed Insights. but it would be really good to see perf metrics alongside sustainability metrics in all these tooling. So now that we've measured our site, we can get on to the fun part, which is optimizing everything. The name of the game here is to reduce data transfer when our sites are requested by as much as possible. The less data we're transferring, the less electricity we have to use for our sites to load, and that's a good thing. It's all the usual suspects here in terms of optimization. You will find the biggest and the easiest wins for images and fonts, and especially images. You can make some quite substantial gains by optimizing there. It gets a bit trickier when you get down to video and JavaScript and CSS, but if we're able to make savings across all these areas, then you'll not only have a lighter site, but you'll have one that, by its very nature, has a lower carbon impact as well. We can take things a step further by caching, because the most carbon-friendly request is the one that doesn't need to be made at all. If you can leverage browser caching by either using headers or a service worker, then by all means, go for that. And when you do need to make requests, use a CDN and edge caching to reduce the amount of, to reduce the distance that data has to travel when it is requested. Again, less distance traveled, less electricity used. That's what we're after here. When you are looking at CDN providers, do check if they have a sustainability plan or a policy on their website or in their marketing materials. If they don't, or if you feel it's a bit wishy-washy, then ask their sales team, bring it up with them. Because the more developers that are asking for this, the sooner companies will realize that this is something that matters for their customers and their potential customers. And they'll then start to act on it. Now, everything we've looked at up until this point is our requests and resources within our control. But as the latest Web Almanac shows us, over 45% of website requests are actually requests out for third-party resources. 45%, that's nuts. But that's also a large chunk of website traffic that, if we can make green, can help us take huge strides towards a more sustainable web. This is a bit of a shameless plug. I recently launched this website, mythirdpartiesgreen.com, where you can enter a URL and it will check to see the third-party requests made from that page, and then whether those requests are hosted on green web hosts. If you do use third-party resources on your site, then all the usual best practice still applies, especially checking if you still need them. It's always good to audit them periodically. More importantly, though, if you are someone that provides services on the web via third-party requests, what can you do? Can you shift to a green web host? Or can you make more optimizations to your code to reduce the amount of data that you're making people download each time they request your resource? And don't discount the impact that these optimizations can have. This quote is from a blog post by Danny Van Kooten, who, when he optimized a MailChimp for WordPress plugin that he manages, he found that reducing a single kilobyte from a file that's loaded by 2 million websites saves about 3,000 kilograms of CO2 per month. That is the impact of a single kilobyte at scale. It's quite significant. And just finally, this one is not really perf related per se, but I think it's worth including. Head over to the Green Web Foundation's website and check to see if your current sites are on green web hosts. And if you've got a new project coming up, or if you want to migrate your current sites to green web hosts, they've also got a directory on their website that you can take a look at. All right, so we've done all the hard work, we've made our website green, but what does that mean in terms of performance? Organic Basics is a good case study here. They have two versions of their online store. The first is your regular e-commerce platform, Shopify, Preact, JavaScript, jQuery, all that stuff. The other is what they call a low impact site, where they take steps to reduce the amount of data being transferred on each page load. You can see one of those steps here where they do not show a detailed product image until the user actually clicks to request a detailed image. Head over to their website because they list out a few of the other steps they've taken to make that site more sustainable. But what does this mean in terms of performance? What we're looking at here is real user data from the Chrome User Experience Report. And I don't think I have to say too much more. I think it speaks for itself. Not only is the low impact site greener, it's also faster. So just to wrap up, you're a single developer. What can you do? What impact can you have? It's easy to think that I'm just one, I cannot do that much, but any impact is an impact. So start with your own site. Start with the open source libraries and plugins that you maintain. Those are things that you can easily control. Bring sustainability up at work, whether that's part of a broader performance project or a company-wide sustainability push. Set a carbon budget. I stole this one from Michelle, who'll be speaking a bit later today. She wrote about it on CSS Tricks. I think it's a great idea. The same way that we set performance budgets for our sites, let's start to normalize setting a carbon budget as well. And finally, I think most importantly, share your journey. Whether that's in a blog, a podcast, a video, I mean, even a Twitter thread if you want. You never know who you might inspire. Someone might read what you've written and decide, hey, let me start to green my corner of the web as well. And that's how we can really make a difference. Thank you for your time. You'll find copies of these slides at fershad.com/talks, and you can track me down on Twitter and GitHub at Fershad. Cheers.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Again, I'm going to reiterate the fact that it's extremely late your time, and I do appreciate the effort of staying up. But I do want to mention that I'm not sure if I forgot, but that site that has the low carbon variant, I guess we could call it that. That kind of caught me off guard, and I was in the comments and I said, "Wow, that's pretty amazing." Have you heard of this thing called the Waffle House Index in America?
It rings a bell, but I can't for the life of me think what it is.
Yeah, it's fine. I find there are parallels there because essentially it has to do with storms in America, and basically if Waffle House is a restaurant, a chain of restaurants, and they grade it. They grade the storm by the amount of Waffle House outlets, restaurants that are open. It's like a chain. So they've been known to be sort of storm ready, and if they're even closed, it's a bad storm. And
Yep.
and long story short, we talk about sometimes Waffle House Index and people being able to sort of like still operate, in low sort of resource conditions. And so, I mean, when I think of the site that has like a low carbon impact version, to me, that's like, oh, what happens if I have a, poor internet and
Mm.
I, for whatever reason, I absolutely have to get this 100% cotton shirt, you know, I will get, I will hit the low carbon impact site.
Well, you might, but actually, one of the things that they do on that site is they also monitor the electricity grid that their site is hosted on.
Mm,
And if that electricity grid is too carbon intensive, the site actually goes offline.
wow.
That's another one. Yeah. So they bring up a like a kind of 404 equivalent page. Your request is too carbon intensive, sorry, like
Wow.
that. And yeah, it's it's interesting. There's a few websites out there right now that follow a similar approach, or even tailor their content based on the electricity grid as well.
Interesting, interesting, interesting. Fershad, thank you very much for that.
All good, mate.
First of all, if you want to, I know we talked about getting your slides. I'll get that from you afterwards. But if you did want to share a few resources, whatnot, in the chat, that'd be welcomed.
Yep.
If you want to stick around, like
I'll
I
stick
said.
around, mate. All good.
All
I got a few more tea bags lined up,
okay.
so we should be good to go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Again, some applause for Fershad's first
Yeah.
presentation ever, by the way. So again,
Yeah.
even more thanks for that.